going to record this meeting, so I'm going to start now. I even have a post-it on my screen that says record. I should have put it like right in the middle of the screen. All right, anyone else on any of these? Or should we go to the next question? And I see that there's some comments in the chat too. Okay, well, Charles, let's go to the next question. Okay, here's a big one. So the permit talks about SEMs, and right now in volume 3, oh my goodness, we talk about BMPs. So should we, with this update, adopt the SEM terminology or BMP? Becoming a tight race. Ben says, what's in a name? That's right. This is kind of surprises me. All right, so we have 16 votes in here, and it's pretty tight, and there's more than 16 on this call, so you could swing it. I will say this, right now we're updating chapters 4 and 6. So it would be a slow move if we changed it. Teresa says BMPs should be for construction. I'm not personally familiar with SEMs. Yeah. So would you keep BMPs for construction BMPs and adopt SEMs, which by the way is stormwater control measure? And I would say that stormwater control measure, you know, if you're on a national level, is more popular. Not that BMP is a regional terminology, but I think they're both recognized, stormwater BMP. All right. Lottie says the rest of the world uses BMP. Oh, okay, there's an idea. Will, do you want to talk about that? Will had a comment. It's practice versus measure. Keep both, but use them based on what depends on what you're doing.
Yeah, so just if an SEM is a BMP, but BMP would be broader, as in, you know, how much nitrogen you're using in fertilizer, and street sweeping's a BMP, and, you know, maintenance, picking up trash is a BMP. But I think a SEM is, you know, a sand filter, a bioretention basin, etc.
A thing, whereas a practice is, you know, how you do something, the manner in which you do it.
Yeah, so I think it just depends on, in the manual, sort of which piece you're talking about. Something that's a permanent measure, I think, clearly shows it's a measure and being constructed. So that's my opinion.
Okay. I like it.
This is Candace. I mean, we changed our criteria or our guidance to have SCM, but I feel like that's had its own challenges. But that is what the permit says, and so at least the phase 2 permit. So I don't know. I don't know if Boulder really cares.
Okay. When we did this, you know, 10 years ago, there were some strong feelings of keeping BMP. But now with the permit changing, maybe it's time. Okay. Well, it looks like SEM has won this debate. And we've got 18 votes in. So you can speak now or forever hold your peace, or just be okay with whatever comes out, which it looks like SEM. I'm okay with the group making that decision.
Yeah, I like what Will said in terms of that component, because I think a best management practice in a place that's, or in a facility that sees a lot of trash, might be installing a trash can on the side or curb. And
All right. Well, thank you for that. Okay, next question, Charles. Are you working on any EDB retrofits? So this was something that, you know, I think for MS4s, this is a big effort. And so we could potentially add something to the manual specific to retrofits.
Hi, Holly. Are you referring a retrofit means like it's a old detention pond with an outlet pipe and it needs a water quality box to control flow? Is that what you're? Okay.
Thank you for the question. In Colorado, we have a lot of EDBs, right? And so I've seen a lot that need help. So it could be an EDB that was constructed improperly and needs to be retrofitted to be more functional, or it could be a detention basin that you want to go back and add water quality to. So either way, yes. Can you tell Charles how many people have responded to this question?
Yeah, I can on the back end.
Okay. So you don't have that in front of you right now?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, it looks like there's a need for guidance here. And I think we have a follow-up question on this, so we can understand that a little bit better. Let's go to the next question. All right, so with regard to those retrofits, what is your biggest challenge with retrofitting existing detention ponds or detention basins or extended detention basins? So we know the biggest challenge. It could be a component like, yeah, maintenance. Drain times that are too long. Oh, lack of money to do retrofits. I can't help with that in the criteria. Safety. Can the person that wrote safety expand on that?
That was Laddie. And just when they're filled with water, what's the safety consideration for someone getting in there and drowning? What's the thought process behind having this big piece of land and it filled up with water? So have we thought about that?
Original design data. Okay. Is there anyone that wants to unmute and comment on what they're seeing on the screen or what they inputted into the survey? Okay, all right, well, we can move to the next one. Okay, so the question of checklists has come up. And I just wonder, I think checklists sound like a great idea. I wonder how useful they are over time. If when you're going through and reviewing a design, is it something that you consistently use if it was a good checklist? And someone, I can't tell who it is. Okay. Okay, Laddie is saying, what if, whoops, I lost the comment. What if it's a decision tree? So we do have a decision tree and BMP selection in a different chapter of Volume 3. And that probably needs to be updated. But that wouldn't be part of Chapter 4. Okay, I wonder if 10 of you think they're useful and the others didn't bother to say no, but only 10 of you have voted on this one. All right, well, let's go to the next slide. It's still 100%, so that's pretty strong. So if we had checklists, if we added checklists, what kind of checklists would be useful? And I've heard everything from, you know, all-encompassing, includes information about the floodplain to more detailed action-based, like, are you an inspector? Are you doing maintenance? So what do you think the biggest need is with regard to checklists? For the 10 of you, at least 10 of you that think they're useful, what kind of checklist do you want to see? Okay. I think key criteria compliance would be the most appropriate in a design chapter. How many of the people on the call right now use UDBMP as kind of a checklist? Because it goes through design. Can anyone speak to that? Do you use UDBMP to ensure that they're meeting design?
I did when I was a reviewer.
Spur the designer to think about common components. So on that one, are you talking about things that are missed, or spur the designer to think about intent?
Yeah, Holly, this is Jim. I put that comment in there. I guess my worry is that we have a checklist out there that reviewers maybe don't necessarily they just go through and check the list and say, okay, if you don't have this check, then it's not a good design. Right. Whereas I would rather have a checklist out there that a designer goes through and thinks about, okay, have I thought about how they would maintain it? Have I thought about, do I have base flows that I need to consider? You know, just are we covering all the bases, not necessarily is a simple checklist that a reviewer just brainlessly walks through.
Yeah.
And that might be a reason that we only had half the votes on the last question for the checklist. But if it was general enough, like it was just a checkbox for pre-treatment or something like that, just to make sure that the designer and the reviewer are evaluating each component, but not at a very specific level.
Yeah, I voted yes for the checklist, but I would have voted maybe if it was an option. Just
Okay.
because of that.
I'd
Yeah.
also,
Oh, go ahead.
I would say the checklist too that is more broad, like Jim was saying, but potentially something where a designer could put in their kind of thought process of, you know, why we went with one design over a different option that could be included in a drainage report or something, or just supplemental to a submittal, so that could probably provide the reviewer a lot more information of what we were thinking as we were going through the design, and maybe reduce some of the comments back and forth of why didn't you try it this way?
Right. We don't want a checklist that designers can use to not read the criteria and just use a recipe, right? We want a checklist. What I'm hearing based on your comment, Heidi and Jim, is that the checklist should get the designer to explore and require them to really understand the intent behind their design. Is that right?
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, good. I like that. Maybe that's my concern with checklists, is that it removes the requirement to actually read the criteria. It also speaks to the comment about providing a narrative. Maybe it's something in between the two.
Hi, Holly. I agree that a checklist, in my opinion, should be a source for the design engineer to guide their thought process and to make him aware of items that may skip his mind. For example, the first step, I get pushback all the time about disconnecting impervious areas. And it's very simple. Did you disconnect the downspouts? Do you have a landfill? I have lots of historic landfills, and infiltration is a big deal. So what did you do to protect, to reduce infiltration in this case? Sources of, did you identify pollution sources? They skip through that constantly. They don't even understand what their land use is and what are the sources of pollution in a gas station and the oil spills. So commercial features. Well, anyway, so that's my thought. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. No, I really like the comment.
You know, I think one of the thoughts that we had based on some of the MS4s that we've worked with is sometimes you have reviewers that have varying levels of experience, and sometimes a checklist could be useful to make sure critical features for successful long-term performance are being included. And so I agree that there's probably some balance between, you don't want people to shortcut not understanding and reading the criteria, but then there's also a lot to remember on each different type of practice. And so it seems like something would be beneficial.
Well, I think what we're talking about also could be beneficial to the reviewer. I mean, if we want the designer to really understand the intent, we also want the reviewer to understand that process. But and I don't know that, I think you could have both. I think, Jane, what you're talking about is, you know, things like, does it have a gasket? Does the orifice plate have a gasket? Like really, yeah,
Specifics, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think what we had talked about previously is that some of the, like UDBMP and some of the design worksheets have a lot of the major, you know, computational kinds of checks already included.
Mm-hmm.
But then
Right.
some of the more detailed features that are important are sometimes overlooked.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, I don't want to create a checklist either that just completely repeats what's in the fact sheet. That's not necessarily useful. If we can speak to the intent, or we can speak to some of the frequently missed items, that would be great. Okay. Is that our last question, Charles, or is there one more? That's it. Okay. All right. I have more. I received an email from Kevin at Boulder. Thank you very much. And there's some questions in it that I think it would be good to speak to. First of all, consider a matrix or intro that matches up the BMP fact sheets to which design standard is applicable to that facility. And we really like that comment. And so we plan to do that. Consider expanding or clarifying if and how runoff reduction standard could be applied to BMPs with storage. Can you talk a little bit more about specifically what you're looking for there, Kevin?
Yeah, so I guess in the Boulder's criteria, we kind of have this infiltration-based hierarchy where we try to promote infiltration as a preferred approach. And so when we wrote up our city code, we kind of had to have this discussion as far as whether or not runoff reduction could be applied to, say, a bioretention cell. And I think we ultimately decided yes in conversations with the district, but I think it's a little bit clunky how we had to kind of define that and expand on what is in the volume 3 right now. We kind of had to add a little bit over that to kind of explain how that would be done. So I think it might be an opportunity to explore with a manual update.
Okay. Is Boulder using UDBMP and the volume reduction calculation that it has in that workbook?
I think potentially yes, though we haven't had a lot of designs come through under this yet. So
okay, I see. Yeah, because it does allow for a downstream BMP, and it helps you size that BMP. So I'm wondering if that takes care of it, or we need more than that. So if you have time to spend with that and want to follow up with me, let's talk about that more.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Should there be criteria to design a water quality swale to meet pollutant removal standard by filtration and particle settling? So that, I don't know, Jane, is there anything in the International BMP database that supports Grasswales as, do we have inflow and effluent quality on Grasswales to the extent that we could treat it under the pollutant reduction standard?
Maybe. I mean, we have influent and effluent TSS data for swales. So we could look at that.
Okay.
I mean, it seems like also as part of the conversation here, generally, it seems like there might be a few questions we might want to explore related to data in the BMP database and how it supports those design standards.
Yeah.
In general.
Are you talking about the proprietary devices?
Yeah, but I think even some of Ben's comments earlier related to percent removal and things like that, effluent concentrations achieved, to see what what sort of reference we could create that could support some of the questions that were asked in that arena.
Okay.
Hey, Holly, that last question you asked, was that one of Kevin's as well?
Yeah.
And Kevin, you meant like a engineered bioswale, right? Not just a grass swale for conveyance or pre-treatment?
Yeah, potentially. So other states have a water quality swale that sets criteria around required grass height, and then there is kind of a methodology that is used in other places around the country to do a water quality design swale. I mean,
and it's got, I think it usually has an engineered media underneath and maybe an under drain as well.
For more of a bioswale system, yeah, I think for the most part that kind of more matches with bioretention design standards. But there are, for example, in North Carolina, where I've done some time, there's a water quality design swale in their manual. Like you can design a swale for water quality that's not based on infiltration. That's based on sediment removal and nutrient removal, associated nutrient removal based on filtration and settling within the swale length.
Okay. Another question, clarify applicability of the WQCV design standard for lined systems with and without sand media. So on that one, Kevin, the WQCV standard is volume based. So I don't know if it would matter whether or not it's lined or has media, specialized media. Is that your question, or is there more there?
Yeah, I might not have typed this one super well. So this is under permeable pavement.
Oh, I
You're
see.
frequently seeing that we've had a lot of permeable pavement systems go into town that are lined and don't have sand. And so I guess maybe the question is better, like what design standard does that meet, and does it meet a design standard? Might be more applicable than saying WQCV, because I think design standard for permeable pavement, I think we're just struggling with a little bit in Boulder.
Okay. All right. Good question. There's also a specific stakeholder meeting for that one, or stakeholder group for that topic as well. So we'll get into more detail. Okay, and then consider the applicability of applying a clearinghouse so municipalities can more consistently review essentially the pollutant reduction standard. And that we talked a little bit about that, but we will get into more detail there. Has any of this discussion, is there anyone on that wants to bring up other questions maybe this discussion has prompted or that you've been thinking about? Feel free to just unmute. Okay.
So there was some talk earlier about making it very clear what minimum requirements are versus guidance.
Yeah.
And that got me thinking, wasn't part of the Colorado Springs decision where there was one specific project and the designer or the Springs was arguing that the minimum requirements were just water quality capture volume and release rate. But then I thought the decision came back that no, there were other, it does require a trickle channel or trash racks, that there were other components that were minimum. I could be misremembering. I haven't visited that in a while, but I wonder if that would be useful in that regard to be very clear that this is the very minimum to meet the standard, and then still have other guidance or recommendations for things that aren't. I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you think about this? If we have a fact sheet, let's say it's just, for example, EDBs, and we say that in the fact sheet, you must have pre-treatment. That's a minimum design criterion, that you must have pre-treatment. How are you going to provide pre-treatment? That's much less specific than you must have a concrete forebay. Now, we would have supporting information in the upfront material that says, these are all of the ways that you can do pre-treatment, and these are some advantages and disadvantages and different considerations that you would have based on the site and the scale. But that's one way to say, this is a minimum design standard. Sorry, that's bad use of words there. This is this is part of the minimum criteria that you must have pre-treatment, but you have this flexibility on how to do that.
I agree with you in that example. I'm thinking of other cases too, like with bioretention. Is the minimum surface area a recommended minimum, or is that like no negotiating kind of thing?
Yeah.
And just making it very clear, I guess, of.
Yeah, because there are things that we put in the criteria that are based on science, and there are things that are based on, you know, best available judgment, best available information, right? So it's kind of nice to know where it comes from, but also beyond that, where the lines are, as far as.
Hey Holly, this is Will. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm on now, switched over to my mobile. That was my comment originally, the minimum design criteria versus designer choice. And I think exactly where you went with the forebay is a perfect example. And to me, that makes perfect clarity. So as a designer, the design community can kind of go, okay, this is where I have some flexibility and can make some decisions based on site criteria, you know, like bioretention, you know, based on the infiltration rates, whether you need an underdrain or not an underdrain. You know, here's the criteria that you should go to an underdrain if your soils are, you know, don't exceed this infiltration rate. So, you know, those sorts of things where it's really clear of like, this is the minimum, and then these are kind of in your choice pattern. And I think that would help both us as designers and the reviewers have clarity.
Okay, great. Are there any concerns with kind of going this route? From a permit compliance standpoint, or a reviewer standpoint, or a reviewer with a background that's not stormwater standpoint? All right. I like it because it allows for some innovation and flexibility, and it makes it hard for CDPHE to put criteria in the permit, which does not allow for flexibility and innovation. Okay. Other comments or thoughts that have come up throughout this?
Unknown participant is now joining.
Throughout this discussion. Jane, did you have anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about with our last 5 minutes here?
You know, I think the things that we talked about earlier, most of those came up as part of this discussion in one way or another, I think.
Okay. All right, let me ask the group this with our last 5 minutes here. We are going to have a number of other topical stakeholder meetings, many of which you have also signed up for. When is the next time, or at what point in the process should this stakeholder group meet again? my thought on it is that it would be good to put in front of you, at a minimum, a draft outline of that upfront material, and a draft of what a typical fact sheet would look like, so that you can kind of have something in front of you to respond to, and that maybe helps bring some ideas up. But some of the comments that I've heard today, which are very helpful, are really specific to how we address certain fact sheets, how we address grass buffers and grass swales, and how we make a better connection between those and the volume reduction information. So I think it would be good to kind of take what we've heard from you today and see how well we can fit it into the new chapter, and then meet again and hear your comments on how well we did with that. Does that sound good? Okay. All right. Well, I will. We're almost at 12:30 now. I really appreciate your time on this and the input you're providing. Thank you very much, and you will see more emails from me. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Holly.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Unknown participant is now exiting.